Hello everyone and welcome to my video on the discriminant. The discriminant is not actually used to solve quadratics. It's more used to get an idea of the nature of the solutions that you are going to get. What are these solutions going to look like? So let's take a look at the quadratic formula. Negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The discriminant is the part inside the radical, b squared minus 4ac. Right? This part of the quadratic formula is going to drive what kind of answers we get because it falls inside the radical and because it's after that plus and minus. Right? And so the discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula, that b squared minus 4ac that's inside the radical. So let's get rid of this quadratic formula and take a look at what we have here. All right, so the discriminant can be really four different kinds of numbers. The first kind of number it can be is a positive number, right? Positive number. But not only is it a positive number, it can also be a perfect square. So this is the scenario where the discriminant is a positive perfect square, okay? So when this happens, the kind of solution you're going to get are two real rational roots. Right? So when your discriminant is bigger than 0 and a perfect square, you're going to get two real rational roots. Since it's positive inside the radical, they'll be real. And since it's a perfect square, the radical will eventually disappear and simplify, which makes it rational. And this is going to be different than the next scenario, which is when it's greater than 0, but not a perfect square. So b squared minus 4ac is bigger than 0, so it's positive, but it is not a perfect square. Right? And the only difference between when it is and is not a perfect square is that it will no longer be rational. Right? Any radical that cannot be simplified or any square root that cannot be simplified completely is an irrational number. So two real irrational roots. Right, so that's the kind of answer you get when your discriminant is positive but not a perfect square. All right, so far we've covered positive perfect square, positive not a perfect square. Well, we've pretty much taken care of all the positive solutions. So the next one is going to be when your discriminant is equal to 0. Right, if it's equal to 0, then that part inside the radical is going to be 0. So when you do plus or minus a 0, it really doesn't change anything. Right? So this is going to be when we get two real rational double roots. Right? Two real rational double roots. And I guess you could think of it as one real rational double root. That's probably better. Right? One real rational double root. So basically you're going to get one answer that kind of happens twice, right? Because you're going to have that plus or minus 0. Plus or minus 0 is the same thing. And since 0 is a perfect square, will also be a rational number. Oops. So let's take a look at the last scenario. We have positive equal to 0. So the next thing is going to be less than 0. Right, so it's a negative number. And this is going to give us two complex conjugates. Right, so our solutions will be two complex conjugates. Anytime you have a complex number as a solution, it always comes in conjugate pairs. Right, so an example of something like this, it could be like 3 plus or minus I root root 2. 4 is a perfect square, so it's a bad example. And something like that. Example of a discriminant that's negative would be like, negative 4. Something along the lines of that. All right, so this is all the kinds of solutions you can get by looking at the discriminant. So hopefully this helps you out.